Hello, this is Sekiro's Combat Explained. In this video I'm going to talk about Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, and explain the game's combat system in detail. Yes, I know it's the year of our Lord 2024, and the game came out in 2019, so I get that who the hell cares anymore. But I don't give a fuck! This video is for anyone who is late to trying out the masterpiece that is Sekiro, or anyone who put the game down because they just couldn't figure out the combat. There are some other videos around that go over the basics, but most of what I've seen is pretty generic and only mildly helpful to new players. Like be aggressive, parry better, so forth. Yeah, thanks nameless YouTuber. I'm going to try to go into further detail, but also give a quick, simple summary of exactly what you are supposed to do in this game. I'll give a general rundown at the beginning, then go into further detail with some of the deeper components of the game later on, along with some exceptions to the rules and so forth. So okay, here we go with the quick overview part. So you've probably heard that you are supposed to be aggressive in this game.
Hesitation is defeat.
But that's not the full story. The trick is to be aggressive, but reactive. You are attacking whenever you can, but you're not spamming the button. Because after every attack you are watching what the enemy is doing, and you are listening for the sound the enemy makes when they block or deflect you. In Sekiro, both you and your opponent can either block attacks or perfectly deflect them. Going forward, I'll just call perfect deflections parry, and less than perfect deflections block. The sounds these make are distinctive. You may have noticed that when an enemy is able to interrupt your attack and hit you, that hit came right after hearing this sound. That higher pitched sound is the sound of a parry. It's the same sound that Sekiro makes when you perfectly deflect the opponent. When this sound is heard from the opponent, that means that it is the opponent's turn. It means the opponent has frame advantage, and if they attack right afterwards, they will hit you before you hit them. So the basic premise of this combat system is to keep attacking until you hear this sound, then wait for your opponent's counterattack. Or wait for the opponent to do something that has hyper armor. Hyper armor means that the opponent is taking an action that is not interrupted by your attack. This will usually be a combo or something like a perilous attack or some other exceptions. Most bosses in this game, even up to the final boss, only have a handful of things they can actually do if you keep attacking them. Watch this bitch ass Genichiro here. I'm attacking him, but now he's starting his floating passage combo attack. This move has hyper armor, and like most of these attacks, there is enough wind-up for me to identify that it is now his turn. I deal with this combo attack, then I get right back to attacking. Combo attacks from enemies in this game have a rhythm. You don't need to parry every attack to learn this rhythm. You can actually just sit there blocking at first and listen to the timing. Ding ding, ding 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 ding, ding. Once you learn the rhythm, you can try to parry in time with it, like a dancing game or some shit. So the game is less about being able to perfectly time a parry for every time you would get hit, and more about being able to tap a button in a rhythm. Enemies can also do a perilous attack, an attack with a kanji symbol that you can't block and may or may not be able to parry, either a sweep, a thrust, or a grab. These also mean that it is now the opponent's turn, and I need to get ready to deal with this attack. A few other exceptions are opponents who can dash backwards, jump in the air, or do something else that doesn't care about your sword attacks. So again, keep attacking, but be ready to stop after every attack. This motherfucker Ishin will punish you harshly if you don't learn this lesson. A few notes about some of the things you can see on the screen here. If you've played the game for 10 minutes, you know what these are, so I'll be brief. This is your health, these are your resurrections, and this is your posture. The posture is the important bit. Whenever you deal with an enemy attack, your posture bar will go up. If your posture bar is maxed out and you block an attack or fail to parry it, your posture will break. That looks like this. This is bad. If your posture breaks, mash L1 to regain your stance before you get hit. Bear in mind that when you parry attacks, your posture will not break. So if you're a parry god, you'll never need to worry about this. If you're not a parry god, then you do want to pay attention to your posture and regain it whenever you can. You can regain your posture by holding block. Do this whenever your posture is getting stacked and you have a window of rest. There are also some other fancier ways to deal with posture, but I'll get to that later. So the way you actually kill enemies in this game is by maxing out their posture. With some exceptions, you're not trying to whittle down their health bar. However, enemies will regain their posture over time. The speed that they regain their posture is based on how much health they have remaining. Every enemy is a bit different in this regard, but usually once the enemy is missing about a quarter of their health, their posture regain is pretty manageable. Also, really quick, a lot of these tips won't become especially useful until after you get out of the funnel. This guy is the funnel. Once you get to Ashina Castle, the game really opens up, and so do the enemies you can fight. But until that point, the game is pretty linear, and the bosses and mini-bosses don't really demand this combat system very much. For example, if Gyobu is giving you trouble, you can just hold block, and the Flaming Bull you can beat by parrying the charge. Don't try to chase it around. Once you learn the combat system, you generally don't need to master every single thing a boss or mini-boss can do. You just have to master dealing with their hyper armor combos, their perilous attacks, and any other exceptions that you'll learn as you fight them more. If you don't know what to do, your last resort, or your panic button, is to sit there tapping the L1 button. If you are tapping the L1 button, you won't take damage from normal attacks, but you will stack up your posture bar. When your posture breaks, you will then probably get hit. Some bosses in the game can actually be beaten just by sitting there tapping L1, as well as holding block when your posture gets too high and dealing with a perilous attack or two. So Genichiro over here may seem scary at first, but this is intentional. He's actually the best teacher in the game, and you should enjoy your time with him. If you stay inside his ass and keep attacking him, there isn't very much he can do. But if you give him an inch, he will take a mile. You do not want to let him create space between you two. Sometimes you can't help it, but close the distance again fast. As far as basic enemies go, many of them literally can't do anything to you if you keep attacking them. This poor asshole has no hyper armor attacks or anything to stop you from beating him down. Try this on any new enemy before you get worried about them. Now for a quick word about perilous attacks. The trick with these is being able to recognize them. There are sweeps, thrusts, and grabs. Sweeps need to be jumped over, thrusts should be Makiri countered or parried, and grab attacks are some shit that I'll go over in a moment. Sweep attacks usually start with the opponent holding the weapon out to their side. A lot of times it's their right or your left. Thrust attacks usually start with the opponent either straightening their sword, big surprise, or in some cases holding their weapon out to their left or your right. When you Makiri counter a thrust, you do not want to touch the analog stick. Just tap the dodge button in time with the stab. The timing for these is pretty generous, but you're not looking to time it based on the kanji symbol, as this can be misleading and timed differently for every attack. Instead, just learn the animation of the attack and time your response based on that. Lastly, there are grabs. These can be tricky. Usually the best way to deal with these attacks is to jump backwards right as the grab would get you. But like I said, these can be tricky. Some grabs are best dodged to the side, and some are best to just run away from. And one grab in the game can even be parried. If any particular grab or combo or attack is giving you trouble, just do a quick Google search about it. Meta knowledge goes very far in this game because everything an opponent can do has a clear counter. Now lastly, there are terror-based perilous attacks, like a handful of them. I'll talk about those later. And that is the combat system in a small nutshell. Now I'm going to go into more depth and also give some case-specific examples and also talk about a few enemies that play by their own rules. So all of this stuff really gets tied together by this particular mini-boss. This is Cheater McBitchface. She is also a very scary mini-boss for most players, and also very easily cheesed, which means many players never really learn how to face her. She's also a big fat hoe. But look, if I stay in her face and I keep attacking, there's only like 3 things that she can do to me. She can dash backwards into shooting you, she can kick you into shooting you, or she can grab you and shoot you. Everything else she does will be interrupted by your attacks. This is the Chained Ogre. His job in the game is to be an asshole, to convince you to go to Harada Estate and pick up the flame barrel. You can fight him with the combat system I just explained, but that can be more trouble than it's worth in this case. Most of what he does are grab attacks. So after getting a stealth blow, I'm just going to sprint around him in a circle and hit him 2 to 3 times whenever he whiffs an attack. This is the Guardian Ape. he has one of those rare perilous attacks that are terror based. By the time you see the kanji symbol, it's already too late. Look for this head swooping thing that he does, and when that happens, run away. Also, bonus tip, unlock the hidden forest bonfire past the poison gun bitch before you kill the guardian ape. You'll thank me later. And this guy here is Big Daddy 7 Dicks Ashina, the main boss of mini-bosses. The secret here is that if you are struggling to learn the combat system, just come back later, once you've gotten the hang of it. A lot of this game does involve swallowing your pride and just going somewhere else for a while. He will still be here, sitting there, pretty late into the game, and even if you miss him, his loot is not missable. And this is Lady Butterfly. She is a poorly designed boss for one reason: she teaches you wrong. Listen to this bitch. Every time you attack her, she perfectly deflects you, but she doesn't counterattack you every time. This early in the game, you should be learning to listen for this sound, and she just does it every time and lets you get away with it. Her loot is really not that important though, so like before, if you are struggling against her, just come back later. Now I could go on about little tips and tricks for certain enemies for an hour, but for the most part you just kind of have to learn and play the game. I do want to give a quick word about prosthetic tools and combat arts though. Not a whole lot, because honestly I'm kind of boring and I just sort of brute force the game with the sword, but there is a lot of sauce to be had with these tools. Everyone has their own combat arts that they really like, and they all have their own niche uses. However, I really only use like 2. One of them is the Whirlwind Slash. I like it because it does chip damage and it can be really cheesy. The other one is Double Jumanji. This is the one that everyone goes on and on about, and it's also what I was talking about earlier in terms of fancy ways to deal with your posture. Because when you hit somebody with Double Jumanji, you regain posture, so it allows you to stay aggressive and keep attacking without having to back off and hold block. There are others of course, but you kind of have to experiment and figure out what you like best. The same goes for prosthetic tools. They all have their niche uses, and they aren't particularly required. The shuriken is really good for drawing aggro, the umbrella is really good for bosses and mini-bosses that you just can't figure out the timing for, and the axe is really good for stacking up the enemy's posture. And before I close out, I'm going to shotgun some extra quick tips. If you want the platinum, do not spend points on boosting your attack with the dragon mask. You don't have to beat Genichiro until you have like 5 prayer necklaces and 7 or 8 gourd seeds. Don't chase the flaming bowl around like a moron. Seriously, he dies in like a minute if you parry the charge, and it's easier than it looks. None of the terror enemies, like the Headless or the Sichumen Warrior, are required, and they do not drop prayer beads, and I almost never use the loot that they do drop. Leave Harada Estate after you get the flame barrel and the axe, and come back later. And you can pause this game, so you don't need to worry about putting shit on your hotbar. If you need to use a pellet or something, just pause. And lastly, here's the pro strat for changing your controls. I've said to use L1 for parry, but I got a lot better when I changed the controls. Try putting parry on triangle, jump on square, action/loot on cross, and L1 for cycling prosthetic tools. And that's it. I don't think I went into quite as much detail as I originally planned to, but hopefully I helped a few people get over the learning curve a little bit faster. There's obviously a lot more to learn, and it will still take time and patience, but if you ever start to feel frustrated, just take a break and go exploring or something. Thanks for watching, and enjoy the game!